thank you so much for coming in on a Sunday, and I'm really glad that there is AC inside, so I'm hoping everyone else is happy about that too. And we are going to begin with a little bit of an intro on what Fight Club is, and then we'll get started. And you will be introduced to the debaters as well. So, hi and welcome everyone. I'm Aisha Sayadasif, founder of Fight Club India Foundation. And we are socializing men's mental health conversations like it's never been done before. And this event is one of our experimental events to see how a generational structured dialogue will be delivered. So thank you for being a part of this experiment with us. Now let's get started off this is how the event is going to go. So we're going to be putting out 3 position statements in front of the room. Not questions, just positions. Each one is a claim about men, mental health, and how different generations experience both. Before each position, I'll read some data, real numbers from Indian research, so we're not just speaking opinions, that grounds this conversation. Then each generation responds. Gen Z speaks for or against the statement from their generation's lived experiences, and millennials will do the same. You are not arguing with each other, or you can, but there is no, you're telling the room what your generation knows, what it's got wrong, and where it stands from personal experience. Audience, before and after each round, you would have all gotten your live poll links. So before the conversation starts from each position, you will be asked to agree or disagree to the statement. You can listen into the conversation, and then after the round ends, you will vote again on the same position. So I hope you have that ready on your phones. Ground rules, as I said, speak from experience, not just theory. No personal attacks, and it's okay to change your mind and accept somebody else's position. You are allowed to counter your own generation's point of views and the others. And before we begin with our position statements, let's start with introducing who's in the room. From the Gen Z side, which is on my left and your right, we first have we'll start from there. We first have Shreya Bafna, a mental health professional. We have Dr. Deep Bhatt, he's an AI engineer. We have Manik Arnija, a tech entrepreneur. And we have Gayatri Tulapurkar, a therapist. On my right, we have millennials, and we have one Gen X in the room. We'll start again from the Gen X, which is Pradhan Acharya, co-founder of Navaditi Solutions. We have Nikhil Vashisht, lawyer. Akash Devaraju, co-founder of Local Fermentco. And we have Iti Bhargava, I skipped Anirudh. Anirudh Dhirendra, CEO of MetaMind. And we have Iti Bhargava, mental health researcher. So those are your debaters. I missed Raja, I'm so sorry. We have Raja Suresh, who is also a creative professional. That's it. Cool. Urban Indians' willingness to seek mental health treatment rose from 54% to 92%. That's a huge shift in just 3 years. But in the same period, India's mental health treatment gap held steady at over 80%. 67% of mental health consultations on Practo are now by men. And yet, a 2025 study of 403 urban Indian men found that self-stigma fully blocks the path from awareness to actually seeking help, regardless of how much they know about mental health. So here's the proposition. Therapy speak has made men better at talking about feelings and worse at actually having them. We will first start with the audience, who will vote on their polling to see if they agree or disagree with the statement. We will take 30 seconds for it. Cool. So now that the audience has voted, we will start from the Gen Z side. We have Shreya Bafna being the open speaker, and we will start with 2 minutes.
Okay, so I want to start off by talking about this metaphor that I heard another mental health professional use. Imagine mental health conversation as a tap that's been sealed shut for generations together, and now suddenly it's being opened, right? And when you open a tap that's been sealed shut for generations, clean water will come out. But along with that, a lot of dirt, a lot of rust, and a lot of discomfort also comes out. And sometimes water doesn't come out at all. Now imagine this scenario with the patriarchal structure there is, the system, the society that has always told young men and boys and has imposed this in them to like not talk about their feelings, don't cry, boys don't wear this, don't be vulnerable, etc. Right? And that has made the tap shut for generations together. And now we're suddenly pushing them to talk about their feelings, to talk about their emotions without realizing and empathizing with the fact that when they do start talking about it, a lot of discomfort, a lot of dirt is going to come out. I do agree that there is a gap between emotional literacy and emotional capacity or coping in men, where they're aware of what they're feeling, but are they willing to do something about it? I don't think so. And I also think this is because of the patriarchal structure that exists. Coming to the Gen Z, I do believe that Gen Z men are very aware of what they're feeling as compared to the other generations before. They have access to a lot of therapy speak language because of social media. And I agree that awareness is the first step, but there are many, many more steps that are there to take for them to be able to do something about it. So I feel like as a generation, Gen Z has taken that first step of becoming aware of what they're feeling and what they're going through. But like I said, I think there's a lot more steps to take to be able to sort of seek help, to be able to have open conversations around mental health. With that being said, with clean water, there is like a lot of dust and discomfort that will come out. And so it's important for us to empathize with young men.
We will now open with the millennial debater, which is Iti Bhargava.
Hi everyone. I think in terms of something that Gen Z has done really well is acknowledge that there is literacy involved as the first step. There is in fact a very specific predictor of suicidality and depression, of when you don't know how to name your feelings. That's actually something that increases the probability that you feel a certain way in high distress. So what I'm trying to say is, like, having the language is actually super important. It is really important to know that you're feeling like you're depressed, but it's equally important to know that you're feeling kind of sad because you didn't do well on a test, or maybe you had a breakup or whatever. And that feeling sad doesn't necessarily mean that you're depressed. So the problem with too much literacy or too much therapy speak, particularly without any next step of what do I do with this information, is that you over-pathologize a condition that you're feeling. So everybody feels emotions, everybody's feeling stressed or nervous or angry or whatever. But when you sort of leave it as the final step of your analysis, that this is my mental health, I am this person who feels anxiety all the time, what you're kind of doing is you've opened that tap, and you've kind of let it not really, it's not going either fully flowing or stopping. So you're kind of in this limbo of like, oh, I know this and I've understood this feeling, but I've actually pathologized myself to not really move forward. So that's the second point. The last point is that while, and a lot of the research I do is with like macro systems and design systems, which also says that like mental health is not a personal struggle alone. It requires scaffoldings. It requires access to a friend who can point you to a therapist, or even if it's not a therapist, it could just be a friend who can listen empathetically. So even if I have all the knowledge, even if I have all the awareness, but if the systems around me don't support me to actually move forward, you're actually kind of going to be worse off. And one of the largest studies that looked at, just destigmatizing as the end goal of like mental health in the UK, what they found was that people were able to understand, and like that's great, but that didn't translate at all to health-seeking behaviors. So in fact, in some ways, awareness is actually not even incomplete, it's a little bit harmful. So unless it's bundled with something of a space like this, or something that like triages to something that actually makes you move into an active health-seeking setup, therapy speak is actually doing more harm than good.
Yeah. Cool. We'll now open the floor for 8 minutes for both of you to argue.
Just take age before beauty. So I come from a generation where we saw the rotatory phone, the tape player, right? We saw trunk on it. So today 5G, Spotify, and sat phones. I don't know if it's fair to make a statement that the tap is always shut. I think it's not binary. We just have different channels of letting it go. Sports, friends, you go on a bike ride, you do something in a group, you do something as a collective, but not necessarily speak. Yes, there is a language given to it, but I think we always spoke, just that the speech was not verbalized as much as it was collective. Was the tap open? Yes. Was there dirt let out? It was called alcohol. It was great therapy. A lot of the youngsters today refrain from alcohol, nothing wrong, nothing right. But I think alcohol was great therapy for us. We had this great bonds. It made us vulnerable to the extent that we didn't care, we didn't know what we spoke the previous day. Which was great therapy by itself, you're not judged. And they wouldn't remember because they just listened, spoke, gave you gyan, but didn't know what happened the next day. So I don't know whether it's fair to say there was a shut tap and suddenly it opened. I think the awareness was there, and it will be unfair to believe that a generation did not adapt to the changing technology ways of the world. And I think we spoke in different ways.
I agree. I do think that there have been different ways for people to let out what they're feeling, and speaking was not one of them before, and I think that there were a lot of other activities that we were involved in, but it sort of hasn't translated down to the generations, and it's still, when you talk about mental health, right, I do think that it's always been a stigma, especially in men, where they're not allowed to talk. I understand that there were other means to sort of express what you're feeling, but that sort of translated across generations. Like, it became intergenerational in the sense that people are not okay to talk about how they're feeling, and a lot of men, I've seen this in my male friendships also, that if they're going through something personal, they usually prefer to not talk about it or not do anything about it, to push it under the carpet and then move on. And that's their way of coping. But is that really healthy or adaptive coping then, is a question. It's just that it hasn't been translated down through to generations in a very healthy manner, because I think that the stigma still prevails around not having like open mental health conversations.
Interesting point. The only thing I invite you all to say is, you're saying that men then, men before and men now seem to have the same way of coping. They don't talk. So I don't know if it's generational or if it's a man thing.
To add to that as well, we are assuming that talking is the way to go in terms of improving mental health, and talking is only one half of it, as Iti said. So even if a man today wants to talk about it, and he does talk about it, it's very little impact to him to have people listen to him. If I say, hey, I'm feeling really low today, and someone comes, oh my God, that's so bad, I'm so sorry you are feeling this way, is the response. That does nothing for me, right? Yes, you are sympathizing, you are empathizing, you are feeling for me, but that does nothing for the feeling I am feeling. So when it comes to talking, it is only the first half. When you talk, whether the person you are talking to can understand that, communicate a solution to you. Men are solution oriented. Going a little away from that, the biggest issue that men and women have when they talk to each other is that a woman wants someone to listen, and a man is like, did you try this? Did you try that? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And the woman is like, no, just listen to me. But a man wants a solution. So when he comes to you with a problem and he is opening up with a problem, he's hoping that you are someone that can give him a solution. It may not fix the problem, but it is a step towards that. And if that doesn't happen, then talking feels absolutely redundant. This now comes into play because I will talk. I am feeling, I will talk.
I am so used to getting responses like, I'm so sorry, it will get better, try this, it may work, I don't know, I am here for you, which a man doesn't really know how to deal with. So he has the therapy speak, he uses the speak, so that he makes sure everyone else feels better about themselves when they are talking to him, so that they don't feel bad because of it. Man doesn't want to be that added burden from the feeling standpoint as well. He's still feeling. I don't think it's worse than actually having the feelings. He's still feeling. He just doesn't want to make this a bigger problem than it is, because man as a provider is always trying to think about never got on fear.
When you say that men are more solution oriented, I agree with that because whenever you put yourself in a position where someone comes and talks to you about their problems, first you have to understand, like, do they consider me actually smart enough to actually have the solution? Usually people know what they want, what the solution is. Sometimes people come to that. Sometimes people don't come for solutions. They usually know what, and whenever you feel that you have to provide the solution here, you're making yourself in a place where you think you're smarter than the other person. So actually, the context of the conversation there really matters, even if it's man or a woman. And that's why the role of a woman in society is there, which is, a man goes and talks to a woman even though he doesn't expect any solution from her.
Mental health, or the way that I'm understanding it as I do this work, is that it's not really about solutions. It's not really about being smart. It's about feeling seen, feeling validated, and feeling supported without feeling like you need to perform a certain role, and that you can just exist to be loved and cared for, and just like you don't need to earn your place on the table. You don't need to be the primary provider. Like a lot of even modern day conversation around like men and women, like even just with like matrimony, is a good signal is that I think something I read recently was how like women don't want to marry a man who's not earning more than them, which again reinforcing the same rule that you're only relevant, you're only valuable of love if you can then be this two-person act. And so as a result, everything goes into substance, which then leads to substance abuse and domestic abuse and so on. So I think there's a serious need to even look at like just taking a step back of like what does it really mean to feel seen or to feel like you're understood without having a solution. Because I also play sports. When I'm really angry, I actually lift weights at the gym. That's how I process. But I also cry a lot. So what I'm trying to say is that I think we also need to, as we're having these conversations, it's good to take a step back and say, why do I feel the need to give a solution? Why do I feel the need to earn a solution? And like, is actually mental health sitting with that discomfort without actually getting to the next step? Like, am I regulated enough to feel like, okay, I've had a fight with someone. Do I necessarily need to drink or like do anything that's making it worse? Or can I just sit with it and like stay with that feeling?
We were really closed. I feel like we just probably didn't have the resources or the outlets to actually figure out how you feel about a certain emotion. That by itself was your way of coping for a very long time. And I think in this generation, like you said, emotional literacy has gotten better. But I think to also add to her point, I think right now what Gen Z is struggling to do is sitting with that discomfort. All of us as humans are wired to believe that every problem has a solution. Every problem has something that's going to fix it, but maybe it doesn't. And that's what sitting with your emotions also means, that you're able to kind of see what that feeling of fear, anger, or sadness looks like without immediately countering it with other taps like alcohol or drugs or abuse for that matter. And that's the part that we're actually talking about, because I think like you said, it's great that we've now opened up a lot of doors and given men the opportunity to, or I think men have given themselves the opportunity to use a lot of words and associate them with feelings. But now we also need to take that a step ahead and see what can be done about it. Like you said, maybe a lot of times you do that in order to make the other person feel better, but I think internally what that does is also bottles up your own emotions, which is then manifested in a lot of other unhealthy coping mechanisms. So maybe right now that we have started with therapy speak and emotional literacy, that's a great place to start out. Now that we've realized this and now that there's awareness, maybe we can learn to do a little more about that. Yes.
Okay. So what I've understood from you is that, okay, you've gotten that, but I think what, in simple words, is that we've gotten kind of like a silence from your generation, that we, in our way, have added some vocabulary. Then that vocabulary is not being metabolized easily by your generation. I think that's like the segue that I'm understanding. But most importantly, I also feel that to the point you mentioned, that it's everybody's still feeling that the reason we're not able to talk is because we're a burden. And I think when that social construct is removed, you will be able to express it without so much silence and in a different way, we will be able to tell ki, hey, listen, it's not a burden, let's act around it. And then you'll be able to sit with your thoughts and, oh, I'm in a silence. Is this person thinking that I'm not able to talk to him? Is that construct very difficult? So that will be also broken. If the fundamental thing that, okay, I'm not a burden, this is not a burden, this activity, it is just like taking a medicine so that tomorrow I wake up and feel better in general. So that's just a little...
No, I agree. I just have one invitation to all of you all. Did you notice how it was quickly taken on a scale of 1 or 5, not between 1 to 5? Alcohol, abuse. You go and play sport, escapism. Right? But hey, there is a tolerance band in between. These are channels. How you exercise the channel is up to each of us. And also therapy. A lot of us grew up, therapy meant, Sala Nimans jaoge, bus number 11. That was what we all grew up, bus number 11. And if you want to call someone your mental, like the way we say today, is you will take bus number 11. Right? But I'm saying, why is it the extreme corners? You see the polarization that suddenly happened about simple things like a game, an exercise, a speech, a talk, was suddenly taken to the other extreme. But there's always a tolerance band. And I think I refuse to accept the fact that you can clearly demarcate masculine with feminine. No, there is an overlap amongst all of us. And where do we seek that overlap? How much do you speak? I think all of us have friends with whom we have opened up and chatted on a serious conversation, zero alcohol, zero drug, zero nothing, zero expectations of even a solution, like he said, though mentally we are wired towards that. But we have spoken. And I think once we realize that we are either taking it to 5 or 0 and nothing in between, I think it may help us. And it's I'm not making an observation, I'm just asking us to think on those lines.
I also completely agree, and I think two things can also coexist at the same time. Like you can have two things can coexist at the same time. You can have an outlet of working out and letting your frustration out, but at the same time also figuring out where that frustration maybe came from or what that feeling of frustration does to you. So I completely agree. It doesn't have to go to extremes, but I feel like in the generation that we live in, people are functioning in a way where it's all or nothing, and finding a middle ground does take a little bit of, like, it is very uncertain. There is a lot of discomfort around that, which is why people resort to either doing nothing or doing like the extreme, like you mentioned.
So I have a question. Which generation decided to do the all or nothing mentality?
To that, I would say that every generation also has their own responsibilities. Only because there was something passed forward doesn't mean that you also stick to it and follow it in the same way.
So no, so the way I look at it is, since the floodgates have now opened with this, as we said, like we're polarizing, as Pradhan said, we're polarizing things. We go into this all or nothing attitude with not just therapy speak, but with terminologies and giving everything a word.
Yeah.
So now, when Pradhan said that we've all probably opened up to someone, if you open up to someone you are close to, it is fine. But if I say the same things that are deep to someone who is not close or a random stranger, I am trauma dumping. That becomes the language that gets used. That, oh, now you are burdening me with the language or with what you are feeling. I don't even know you.
Yeah.
How is this fair on me? That is something Gen Z has done wonderfully.
Yeah.
It's an all or nothing attitude towards saying that, hey, no, this means escapism. This means trauma dumping. This means toxic. The favorite word that we love using. This is toxic, this is not. This is a green flag, this is a red flag.
Yeah.
Why are we making everything into a category and categorizing it to say that this is this and this is not this?
Yeah.
That is something that we as a generation did not pass on, which is probably segue into the next thing as well, to the next generation. That is something that is picked up, and you can go ahead with that.
So I think that vocabulary also started becoming like self-identification. Like instead of using those vocabulary to actually do something, it became a thing where, oh, I'm this type of person. Like these vocabulary mean that, okay, I am this way because I am this, so like it's okay. Like I know why I am this way. So I think, yes, polarization, I think the Gen Zs did a worse number on that because like everything is now way more polarized. I also do think that social media had most
Absolutely.
of it. So like because
Absolutely.
most controversies are very easily more engagement. So yes, I agree with that.
That's great. We're going to move towards our next segment. Sorry, before we move towards the next segment, the post survey from the audience. This is now your chance to vote against out the first proposition. Round 2. A landmark study across 9,205 Indian men found that the youngest men aged 18 to 24 held the most rigidly masculine attitudes of any age group. A 2026 survey across 29 countries, including India, found Gen Z men are twice as likely as boomers to believe a wife should obey her husband. Meanwhile, only 41% of Indian youth aged 15 to 24 think seeking mental health support is a good idea. That's the lowest of 21 countries surveyed. India has 491 million social media users, 68.6% male, and Gen Z spends over 3 hours daily on these platforms. So here's the proposition. The manosphere exists because millennials failed to give Gen Z men something better. Before we begin with the debaters, back to the audience, you vote now for either agreeing or disagreeing to the proposition. For this round, we will start with millennials. The opening speaker would be Nikhil.
Vaishnav.
I
Wait for question.
Can we start?
Yeah, you can start.
We wait for it or wait for now. So we wait for the.
That's
Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack over here, so I'll just get started with the manosphere bit. I feel like manosphere offers two things. One is certainty and identity, in the sense that it gives a lot of certainty, just to that refer, and identity as to who you are, and this is the world that you live in. This is what manosphere aggressively and positively emphasizes. I will just remember that and I'll circle back to it. So now what millennials did, and in my generation, what we did is we questioned a lot, because me as myself, I just put an eye stick at it because I saw a lot of my uncles who were extremely navigant, who treated, who was in this manosphere space where whatever that we associate with now was there in my generation before as well. And our generation, what we did is we questioned it. Why should a man do it? Is this what the world really is? Is this who I really am? This is how we did the Socratic method of asking questions. Is this it? Is this it? And then this is where I think we gave a part solution to the generation ahead, in the sense that let's question everything, but we didn't necessarily provide answers to the extent that to this point, even today, to this day, I don't know the answers myself. But I questioned a lot, but then the younger generation, or this might be a little blanket statement, so I'll just call it down a little bit further, that part of the Gen Zs or the part of the younger generation who don't like these questions and want answers probably reached out to this manosphere, which provided what I earlier said, identity and certainty. So to sum it up, what I feel is there is a little bit of honesty in not knowing. Like there's a little bit of honesty when I say I don't know what it is, but certainty is just easier to live with. So when I'm okay to be in the uncertainty, I'm okay with it. But then if someone who wants an answer, who doesn't want the uncertainty, reaches out to these fears and becomes a bit of a hive mind into saying, you are a man, you are supposed to do ABC, and the world expects you to be doing ABC. So to answer the prompt directly, I don't think the millennials failed to provide the answers. I think we pondered about these questions ourselves, and in these ponderings is where we found ourselves, but a segment of the Gen Zs probably don't like questioning and they just want answers. That's where I stand on this issue.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think I wanted to understand, why does the manosphere exist? So for me, I think it is deeply rooted in loneliness, as in, okay, what does all my suffering mean? Like, what is, when you have a question of what does any of this mean, or what does my suffering mean? I feel like manosphere gives a very clean, like you said, clarity. It is what giving you clarity to say that, okay, I'll tell you the overall story of what Manosphere is trying to print. So the story is that you're not the problem. This is the world is like this outside, and if you just do these steps, you will actually succeed in life. So that is the story that Manosphere is trying to push outside. And I feel like this is deeply rooted in loneliness, because when you have that solution-oriented attitude when you're alone, and I feel like the next thing you would look for is like, okay, what does any of this mean? Why am I suffering? So Manosphere gives a very easy answer that, okay, you're not the problem. And these are the solutions that you need to look forward to. And the answer is, okay, Manosphere now exists. So I don't think it's a generation issue as to like, did millennials do this or just Gen Z did this? But the red pill exists. So my thing is, what is the alternative? What is the blue pill story? The red pill story is so strong to say that you're actually not the problem. This is the problem, go do it. So there is no alternative or like a very strong story statement that is there in the blue side. What is the blue pill story? So what I think is a blue pill story is vulnerability, which is something Manosphere is completely against or shown as a very big weakness sign. Yes.
Sorry, some of my friends here from my generation, blue pill is not what we are thinking about. So when you look at the blue pill, red pill thing, I think it's about the comfort of ambiguity. Right? A lot of us came with ambiguity. I remember when this whole thing was, when we were growing up, there was a book written by a gentleman called Neil Strauss, which was The Game. He's supposedly a New York journalist who invaded into the pickup artist society, the underground society, went on to become the creme de la creme of that. I remember all of us reading that book and trying to figure what is peacocking, what is this, what is that, right? Those are channels again. We say there's a lot of traffic. Who's this traffic? It's we. Society. Whose society? It's we. How is it that we are able to just disconnect and say, no, the problem is outside? We are the problem. As long as we can, sorry for using the word, but man up to the fact that we are part of the problem and we're trying to find answers, where we are okay with ambiguity, we'll question, we may not find the answer and say, dekha jayega, we'll figure it out along the way. Whereas you want the red pill of saying, and probably it's the digital world, it's Boolean, ones and zeros. You'll want it, it doesn't. But we grew up with a lot of 2 into 2 is 4, 4 into 4 is 16, right? I don't know how many of us know our table. So it's that. It may be different, but how are we adapting? How is it that we are? I think it's escapist in our thought process that we are not part of the problem. Yeah. So I don't think it's a red pill, blue pill problem. It's about, are you willing to take the right pill to fix what is your problem? How is it that all of us have the same red pill or the blue pill problem?
I think to add to that, it's more than just feeling lonely. So two things. One is the manosphere existed well before millennials, Gen Z. We can go back all the way to World War I, and manosphere probably existed there as well. It's just that it happened in smaller clumps and there was no direct access. Like as you said, social media has now given you direct access to everybody. Manosphere in Germany, manosphere in Uttarakhand, manosphere in Malaysia can all come together and band together and become one strong manosphere. Again, I'm using this word maybe very wrongly. I don't know the proper lingo behind using manosphere in a plural sense. But the problem that comes into play, even from our first prompt, is that men lack clarity within themselves. So now when you don't have that clarity as to who I am as a person, the manosphere gets to dictate that for you. And who are they? As Pradhan said, it is all of us. So when we get together and some of the stronger voices decide to say, man is like this, man behaves like that, man will do this, we follow. And the easiest way to do that is movies, social media, anything that we feel is appealing, anything that we as a society chose to give appeal to. I'll give you guys a story. It might sound like trauma dumping, I don't know. But with regards to this manosphere, and this is well before social media was in its thing. I was in school, I had just graduated school and I was moving to the US for college. And just before going, a bunch of my friends were like, oh, you're going to America. And our vision of America was a frat party. College was frat party. You go, you'll party, you'll sleep with a lot of women, you'll have access to all of this, it'll be amazing. And so the conversation amongst men in my school were that, oh, Anirudh is going to go to America and sleep with a lot of girls. This is going to be amazing for him. What a time, all of that. I was a sports person. My main goal was to participate and win in the Olympics in sprinting. So for me, none of this mattered. Parties didn't matter, women didn't matter, none of that. It was all about this. But I did not have pure clarity in myself as a man. So when manosphere started talking about me sleeping with women and that this is going to dictate my manliness, it got into my head. So I went to America. I still did my thing. I still trained for the Olympics. I barely went for parties, didn't sleep with any women or any of that. Not that my parents are watching, but just saying it as it is. But when I came back, I made up this story that I had gone for the Halloween party. A few women had flirted with me, but I added to it saying that I then went and slept with them. And that made me the hero in my group. I was the king of manosphere here, if that is the right way of using it, I don't know. And so now that story went on and on and on. I was like, oh, this guy, he did it. People who never knew me had heard about this story because it had trickled down. I'm assuming in the manosphere or just in general. I'll stop saying manosphere. And so then what happened is that fast forward many, many years later, I started dating a girl. We were very happy together. And I had told her, I have never lied to you in my life when we had a fight. But I did. This was the one lie I had told her. So I came clean to her and I told her the truth. And she was like, oh, this is such a stupid lie. Like, what is the big deal? So be it, whatever, whatever. I said, yeah, but I want to say that I am now never going to be someone who lies to you. This was the one lie I had told you. So now this is me telling you the truth. Fast forward to us breaking up. Very bad breakup. I was hurt. I was heartbroken, blah, 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 blah. But it gave me clarity as the kind of man I wanted to be. I wanted to be a truth-telling man. So this stuck with me. And so then I reached out to every single person I knew or remembered who I had told this lie to and messaged them and said, hey, remember this? They were like, yeah. I was like, that was a lie. I'm sorry I lied to you. This is something that I was going through, whatever. I think you should know. Whatever you want to move forward from it is your choice. But this is me coming clean to now rebrand myself to tell me, for me, that I am someone who doesn't lie. But I had to retract, go back, do all of that. And that's a lot of work. It's a lot of dealing with the manosphere and fighting the patriarchy and all of that for me. Which is what men need to figure out within themselves. How they do that, I don't have that specific answer. But the manosphere, coming back to this, is what dictates all of that. When we lack clarity of who we are within, the manosphere then controls us fully. And now with social media, it makes it so much easier to do it. I don't think it was specific to millennials passing it on or creating it for Gen Z. It existed for a very, very, very long time.
I also feel that, I'm so sorry. I also feel that now, considering the millennial and Gen Z and everybody's talking about the internet aspect of it, the manosphere has become very, very strong, mainly in regards to the whole anonymity surrounding who's amplifying it. If the opposite of that, I mean, if somebody knowingly promotes the manosphere aspect of it, you know how badly they get pushed down and shuts down, and that works in the positive favor of things. To be in the positive side of things, if everybody does it without the umbrella of anonymity, and we don't have the pressure of, okay, be toxic, this, that, all of those. I think all of them can be subdued in a very well way.
Okay. Actually, we would want more men like you to be the people who pass down things to the generation that we have. But the unfortunate reality, and I think I'll disagree with you on this point, is that there are not men like you who are being heard and very popular as well, right, on the pedestal. Unfortunately, the men who are being put on the pedestal are like Andrew Tate, right, who have like the norm, there is an erosion of norm that has happened over time where, you pretend to be good and you're not. That's a hypocrisy that was accepted. Nowadays, it doesn't happen. It is actually promoted that you become a more selfish, egocentric, misogynist, racist person, and that is promoted. And if you're not,
then you're looked down upon. In a weird way, that has been an expression of like the selfishness and egocentricity of men, and that is providing answers to the young men that they lack. This also comes from the position, because when you said that if someone promotes that manosphere, they are looked down upon. They are not, because Andrew Tate is the person who is the most Googled person, I guess last year, even about Donald Trump. There are people who are like Sneaky or someone, if they walk on the street, there will be extreme following, they will be surrounded by all the teenagers. You can see all the images and everything. And why young people are following them is because they, when you said like manosphere, people will look down upon anyone who supports manosphere, was because of shame, right? Now what these people have done is they have removed that part of shame as something that is they even feel at all. Like they have removed that organ like an appendix. They have completely removed it, and it makes you feel that you won't be judged at all if you do anything shameless. Because they don't judge themselves as well. The hypocrisy doesn't exist if you yourself don't have a standard of how you look at yourself as, right? I will not name the person who's the most powerful person here because I want to go to that country someday. But he is so popular because of this. It's not despite of that. He's because of this he's popular. Because
actually, as you said, he's rewarding it as well.
Yeah?
It's a reward for being that way.
Yes, it is a reward for being that way. It is a reward, like, you know, you come to go to, and any time, like Andrew Tate would say, I have a Bugatti, and I have this, I have that, and if you don't want a Bugatti, if you don't want to live up to my standards, your girlfriend will sleep with me, or anything like that, right? And that is rewarded. That is what, you know, confused men, and also him as well. Like, there is a documentary of Manosphere at Louis Theroux. He actually goes into the depth of why they exist like this is because their abusive dads have made them like this, right? So it actually, what I'm trying to say here is, what men like you have done is actually on point with diagnosing the problem that the old patriarchy exists, and this is a problem. But when Andrew Tate walks into a room, that room is just empty, right? He's the one who's speaking, he's the one who everyone is following. And that narrative, there's a vacuum that has been spread. And yeah, I think that vacuum has to be filled by the millennial men or men from our generation as well, for the later generations. That it is not okay to be an asshole. It is not, currently it is actually promoted and you're looked upon, like you're looked up to if you're an asshole. But yeah, it is
I'm
not.
going to add a little bit of a layer back towards the proposition. It's good that we're discussing in terms of what works and what doesn't work within that space of manosphere, and we'll stick to the concept and not names. In the fact that there is a generational divide on the conversation, now whether that is from different factors, what we're trying to also understand is where is, now we have certain key figures promoting a certain narrative in the manosphere. The generational divide here, or another key pushing question here, is why do we not have either of the generations having key figures that allow us to see the opposite end of it? Now, where does that responsibility lie? Is it in the Gen Zs, for the Gen Zs who are figuring it out in the world that they've been provided and in the context that they've been given? Or does that responsibility lie with with millennials and Gen X and so on, where they've experienced enough of it through your own experiences as well, and are able to lay a roadmap for the next one? Have we done that or have we not?
So, I think before we answer that, we need to have clarity on whether we are looking at this problem from a systematic lens or a people lens. Because as Sir said, he was looking at it from an individual lens. We need to look at it from a people's lens, or the people who are forming the manosphere. He is a person who stood up to his truth. On the other lens, manosphere, as we have been discussing for a past few minutes, we have been seeing it as shame cultivated into a system that has now as you mentioned, removed shame from the system altogether. So if we see it as a system problem, we would only look for systematic solutions that, we would need something that's an anti-manosphere, something like a place that breeds the exact opposite when as manosphere does. On the other hand, if we look at as from a people lens, all we need is, as you mentioned, we need prominent figures. We do not necessarily need something that's the exact opposite of manosphere to fix this. So we need clarity on how we are approaching this problem before we move on to answer.
True.
So, just to jump into that, I think a couple of themes emerged, but I'll just get to the point. I think some of the role models that we had growing up was like the idea of Shah Rukh Khan and Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. I think that's a really good cultural point also to look at how we reframe masculinity from this like soft boy, this romantic and blah blah blah, to like look at the films we have today. And obviously the context and the socio-political, all of that is, I'm considering that. But like look at the films that have grossed the highest margins, Animal, Kabir Singh. Like what are you promoting? You're sort of kind of using the same manosphere ideas and saying, ye to normal hai. This is how it is. And that's kind of what Donald Trump has done. I haven't
He still has to go. You can't use his name. Come on. We'll bleep it. We'll bleep it out.
But what I'm trying to say is that I think that's a really good point because, it's easy to say that, few people can be reflective and have a good therapist and like work and all of that. But what we really need is cultural icons. What we really need is like an alternative to be like, I can be really strong and manly and whatever, and I can be incredibly soft. And I mean, I don't know. I think after Shah Rukh Khan, I can't really say who else is left. Sorry?
Imran Khan.
Yeah, Imran Khan, yeah. But I think Shah Rukh Khan.
Imran wasn't big enough, no?
But yeah, I'm curious about what is your, where do you anchor yourself in these like hard moments? Like, who is your like person, or who is your like idol, even in that sense? I'm not saying Shah Rukh Khan isn't flawed, at least on camera he was perfect. But yeah, I would love to know more from you.
This is coming from a woman's lens. Men saw lots of flaws in Shah Rukh Khan, but it's okay.
Oh, you're wrong.
So if I may add, I was talking to Aisha the other day and said, it takes a village to bring up a child. Right? And I think we came through a generation where we had generational intelligence. There was an uncle, there was a father, there was a grandfather telling us stories, giving us tidbits on how to handle life, so to say. Why is it now suddenly a responsibility and mantle set on yourself to be this role model for the rest? Why could it not be tidbits of information coming from everywhere that molded us to be what we are? Good, bad, ugly, that's different. But molded us to where we are. Like she said, there were idols, we need them. But can it also be broken down into smaller aspects where expectations are set? Where it is generational intelligence, your friends. Like she was saying, there are female friends who can give you so much in terms of how to be. And who decides this is what a man is? I don't know.
Yeah.
This is how a man should be. Forget the manosphere, forget otherwise. So I think this whole generational intelligence is probably lost. The fact that we look up to someone and not internalize things is probably lost. The fact that you expect a responsibility, a mantle, and an excuse to say they did not show us the way is lost. Hey, what about awareness? You all tell us today is the day of the digital age. I have it on my fingertips. I have so many examples not to learn from. And look at the dichotomy. On one side you said, hey, we want more men like you. Another side you said, Andrew Tate. And I'm going to invite you and say, hey, I'm going to pick up something from him. I'm going to pick up something from him, but I'm going to be me.
The problem there is efficiency. I'll tell you why. Whenever you say, I'm sorry, can you reinstate the point where you said, you were basically saying like a few, like
I'm saying it takes a village today. Why are you looking at two idols?
Yeah.
And you didn't call me sir, so I won't answer your question.
But the reality is when Salman Khan gets that Tere Naam Ka hairstyle, people will get it. Right? The efficiency is the problem. You need idols because there would be people like you who look internally and don't look at names and culture icons and anything. But there are majority of the people who would be looking at them. And that's why addressing...
I'm with you. Yeah. I'm completely with you. I'm saying why should it only be that? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It can't be, again, coming back again, I'm repeating myself. Look at how the Boolean comes up. It's either ones or zeros for you.
Yeah.
Right? What happened to the rest of it? Why is it ones and zeros? Why not a scale of 1 to 5, 0 to 5, where you pick up from different places? And I'm not saying do it. Very easy for us as generation, no, do it this out. I don't know whether we turned out all right. But it's an invitation to say, why can't we explore that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of us are also afraid of accountability here. Like you said, we do place that responsibility onto another figure and of course either blame them or say, oh, why am I always doing this? Okay, I was saying that I think all of us are somewhere afraid of accountability because when you say that this is something that we need to personally take up, I don't think a lot of us are too comfortable in setting an ideal figure for ourselves. And going back to what point he made around that certainty, and manosphere does give you that sense of comfort, of a blueprint for that sorts, that this is something that has been followed for so long. Why not continue to follow it? Why step out of your comfort zone and make it so difficult and so challenging for yourselves? But I completely agree. I think this is somewhere our responsibility to step in for ourselves and figure out how or what being a man looks like for us individually and not as a system. And I feel like that's where the change can also start taking place.
To answer Aisha's the add-on to this though, if we're talking about it from a who does it depend on in terms of generations, I will still say it is on Gen Z. Okay. Purely because you guys built up social media. Social media exists because of you. Social media is as big as it is because of you. Which means to some extent the responsibility is on you now to figure out how you want to get social media to work towards everything we've discussed. Not saying we won't help. Of course, the oldies will figure out and take 1 hour to make a reel and all of that and so on and so forth. 1 hour also is pushing it, maybe longer. But the point is that it's going to be on Gen Z to figure out as a generation how to do everything we've discussed or follow what we have discussed, where we beat the Andrew Tates and we beat the man who shall not be named and everyone else, right? Like, it has to be done from people who know the ins and outs of what you've created. We don't know how to do that. You give us a telephone to this thing, we'll do that. Perfectly, we'll call everybody 20 times and say, don't do this.
Can I challenge that?
Huh?
Can I challenge that a little bit? Yes, of course, social media is a big space where this conversation can be amplified and XYZ. But it is also, if we bring it down to real examples, experiences, real life, can I ask to the whole room basically, in your relations, which is your fathers, your uncles, your brothers, your friends, where do you see those conversations actually happening? Because a lot of it still exists in this internet world that we are taking individually as you are exposed to it, right? And it's all in your head. But in practice, in feasibility, where are you actually seeing this play out? When I say where are you seeing this play out, are you seeing the responsibility, as you said, it should be more from the Gen Zs? Are Gen Zs looking at it as, oh, we need to do this and we have to figure this out on our own, without knowing from our fathers, without knowing from our brothers as to what is it actually that we're supposed to do? Or are you seeing it the same way? Are you seeing that, oh, we didn't get it from our previous generation, so we're now figuring it out ourselves, so we don't know what to tell the other the next generation, which is your younger brothers, friends, whoever. Where is that playing out in your lives?
I feel, with my 2 cents, when it happens on a one-to-one individualistic level is when it really gets amplified. Because after speaking to a bunch of people, what I've realized is amplification is good, groups are good, but a lot of people, at least in my age group, have told that groups are not that beneficial. When you have that one anchor telling you, or you're confiding and it's working out, that gives you a positive thing. You are putting that positivity in another person, and that compounds one to one is when it really works out. Yes, they do have the responsibility of amplification, but I think it is done on ground level, on a very face-to-face, extremely not manner, then it really helps, is my 2 cents on it.
And I had clinical depression, and I came back, and the only place I wanted to come back was when I was living abroad. My parents have never gone to therapy. They don't understand the therapy speak, blah, blah, blah. But I think I was very certain that I needed it, so my parents and my brother would drive me to the therapist, wait for me, and then I'd come back, all of that. But I think what this experience taught me was, one is that it's a community. It takes a village, like you said, to do anything. But it takes a village to be healthy and to feel like you belong and that you're worthy and all these things. I think the way of doing this is knowing that I'm able to update my beliefs. I think my parents did that, and that's why we built a better relationship, because I was able to be extremely vulnerable without them telling me a solution. Like, you went abroad, that's why you're depressed or whatever. But making it easy for it to be a non-judgmental space for all generations. To be like, and I'm sure my parents have been depressed. I think it's a very common experience, by the way. But I don't think they had the words at the time or the resources. They got by. You can get well also without any help. But creating that environment for, I don't know what I'm going through, but I just want to tell you. And suddenly you feel like you're not in it alone. Because that's kind of what this manosphere, social media plugs in, right? Like, say if you had a big group of friends that you're like, I'm going to go downstairs and play with them. Suddenly, I mean, the science behind that is very solid. But even just emotionally, you feel like, okay, I had a bad day, but I got a good game of football with my friends. So there's that shift that requires in-person attention, space, that is hopefully non-judgmental, to create these bonds of what the hell do I do with this vulnerability? If I can't share it with somebody who won't decide that I've, usually you're vulnerable to something bad you've done, something that you're not comfortable with. And if that person is like, oh yeah, actually that was kind of shitty of you, which it might be, but what you're really looking for is that I belong even because of my mistakes. So all this to say, I think what we really need more of is the ability to engage in something we're not sure about. And not sure about as in you're still in the pursuit of learning, but most importantly in the pursuit of learning this other person. That maybe I've known this friend for 20 years, but because I'm going through something, I'm able to actually build a deep connection with them. And as a result, I feel like I belong. And as a result, I feel like I'm worthy because I've just supported somebody I loved. This is a long story, but I think the main point is on being able to update your beliefs that you once held very closely, but they could be wrong.
Yeah. I think to add on to that, one last bit of this, of unlearning and relearning a lot of things, because I don't think we can assign blame to one particular generation and say that they passed something forward or there's a generation not doing anything at all. I think there's also again that bit of accountability and being able to make these spaces where vulnerability is okay and normalized and not questioned in general. And I think that's why it is everyone's personal responsibility to also see how they're able to make that space for themselves and for the people around them. And I think the more we do that, and the more, I think, of course, Gen Z has a responsibility to take something forward and give something to the next generation around doing social media better in general. But I feel like Pradhan said earlier, I'm calling you Pradhan now, that we did also rely on our fathers and grandfathers to kind of impart some insight into us. And that's why for us to also go back and rely on them, I feel like there's also some unlearning that needs to happen in those generations as well. It's almost like a house being built. Unless your foundation is sturdy enough, you can't expect to have all the other floors on top of it balanced by themselves. So I think that's something that I also wanted to agree.
I do add on to that. What I was trying to say is, okay, you see some families having the privilege, some families not having it. I've understood after talking to a couple of people, is putting yourself really out there and first understanding what's good, what's bad. After you had that clarity, and even for that, you have that 20-year-old friend and 10-year-old friend, just being very straight up and asking, are you okay? All of that really helps. Once you've broken that barrier, finding a mentor really helps. And I don't feel it is the responsibility of a Gen Z, to help take it forward big. Okay, good. If you're taking that responsibility, great. But it's also ours to maybe, we might also want to help Gen Alpha also, because why not, right? It also has to reverse. We also have to learn a lot from you guys. So in that context, finding a mentor, really opening up barriers, really breaking down the floodgates. Otherwise, how you guys say, we're cooked, right? So that is really critical. Otherwise, it's like just how we were talking in the morning. Like it's just going to the gym and then coming back and then just eating grab food. So it makes no sense. So really acting upon it is what would help.
I think adding on to more on top is also, and slightly a question to you as well. What happens is, even though the social media is run by Gen Z, and the voice which holds the most power is still, the people who are hyper successful, right? Otherwise, people don't listen to anyone who is not successful. He gives some advice, but that doesn't work for him. And why should I follow him? And Gen Zs don't have that many hyper successful people. Statistically, it is not possible. Because they are like, maximum age is like 28. How many hyper successful people are there at 28? Very few. But millennials would be having hyper successful people. If not, then age just gives a more value to the words they say. And also fluency of what you're saying currently in current generation, fluency of what you're saying is holding more value than actually how truthful you are as well. How articulated you are is holding more value than how you're truthful. So Gen Zs are not articulate because of the ambiguity we have, what works, what doesn't work, what will make a successful person. It is not there in the Gen Z, obviously, for obvious reasons.
So I think it was Mark Twain who said, at 17, I thought my parents were the most ignorant bunch. I didn't want to be seen with them. By 25, I was surprised of how much they've learned in the last 7 years. Right? It's that. We have believed that the super hyper successful, whatever that word you use, is my target segment to learn from. We've forgotten that there is information around us. This morning, standing with all of y'all sitting inside, there was so much I learned.
Yeah, there is definitely
your ability to learn. Look at the fact that, how we would have stereotyped before. If I was the only one with a notebook over here, I'd have said, look at the Gen Zs, no notebook. You had a notebook, you were making notes. Does that make us different? Or does that make us similar? Each of us are unique, and someone said, because we're all unique, we're all the same. So I think at some stage, we got to break this notion of there is a barrier, a wedge in between, it's this or that. I think somewhere, like she said, let's man up. Let's also share. Let's learn from each other. If we at our age, sir age, believe that we can't learn from you all, shame on us. Shame on us. It's a collective responsibility. And I think we're striving for utopia if we believe this is how it should be. No, we have to make those micro engagements and see how it improves. I think it's a collective.
Cool. Let's take a breath. And before we move to the next round, this is back to the audience. You can go back to your polls to see if this has changed your position. On round 2. More than double the rate of increase for women. The male to female suicide gap widened from 2 times in 2014 to 2.5 by 2021. At the same time, 43% of Indians report feeling lonely. That's the 3rd highest in the world. And 1 in 5 unmarried Indian men under 30 report having no close friends. So here's the proposition. Men today know more about mental health and are lonelier than any other generation before them. Back to the audience, you can poll first. And we'll move to the Gen Zs for an opening, which is Manik.
So, the men today know more about mental health, and but knowledge has somehow not been into translate to belonging. As she mentioned, the belonging is really important. We do not have that anymore. So it's like we are at the time of the history where, just to head back, there was a time in history where we knew there's something called as dengue-like spread happening, but we didn't know that it was caused by mosquitoes. Then came a time where we knew that mosquito bites cause dengue-like spread. But that still doesn't help. Okay, there's some amount of reassurance there that mosquitoes cause dengue, but what? I have dengue now what? Then came the point in the history where we can now finally have people treated and medicated for dengue and make sure they don't die of it. I think the transition is yet to happen. We still stay at a point where we are lonely. We know the therapy speak, but the next step, the actionable step, the taking accountability step, that transition is still pending. And I'll tell you why. The social media amplification, what it has actually done. So I come from a generation that wants to be accepted, financially independent, attractive in all manners, including sexually, and compete with men their age. And I want to be all of this at 25. And so this just doesn't make me lonely. It makes me lonely while I see those men perform success on social media. I see them every day. It makes me lonelier. So the loneliness, and I remember the other day I was sitting at the table with a few of my friends, most of them were women, and I said that it's easier to raise the oppressor gender than the oppressed gender. Like I kind of meant it's easier to raise a man. But then I realized I was coming from a place of ignorance. I was turned down the table immediately. There were 6 women, all came up to me and said, "What the fuck? No. It's difficult to raise men. It should be difficult to raise men because we have been ignorant for years in terms of understanding our own problems as such in this system. And now with social media amplification, it's just I'm lonelier than ever. And as soon as I start talking about it, there's an element of accountability that comes with it. Now that makes the journey even lonelier because you could just resort to ignorance. And that's fine. You will find a bunch of people there. It's not that lonely. But now, when I enter this territory, I can now accept that. I'll be very honest. Like 10 years ago, I was a sexist pig. I was a huge sexist person, and a few residuals of it still remain. But throughout this journey, it was so lonely. I could not come on stage and accept that. A year ago, I was sexist. I still am, but I am willing to change. Can you help me? Can you help me with this? So this becomes even lonelier. So through and through with ages, I think this loneliness is amplifying with multiple causes.
I'm single, I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. I think there's a huge distinction there. Loneliness is a feeling, it's internalized, it's how you feel. I can be alone, but I'm great at my own company. We grew up in a generation where we said clothes maketh the man. Fake it till you make it. Nothing much has changed. The amplifications has happened in the social world that we are. What were we based on? Your social status, the amount of money you make, and of course, supposedly how good you are in bed, but today that's also amplified. So it hasn't changed. It's magnified, it's amplified, but we've not learned from what has happened with the others. We believe we are the only generation that it happened with. It's happened across the times. The provider thing. We grew up in a patriarchal society. We were all MCPs growing up. What changed? Awareness and a little bit thing. I think the fact that we do not understand that even if we are alone, we're not lonely. I think there's a huge distinction that a lot of us are not able to make. And I don't think the baseline measures of what a man has to be has changed much. How well you do, how good you look, how good you're in bed. This whole body count thing hasn't changed. You've given different names, different terms, but it hasn't changed. I think we have to collectively look at becoming a support system to help this rather than saying it's a Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Millennial problem. The fact that we're talking more about mental health, I think is great. But I think we're also trying to look good in front of everyone saying, I went to a therapist, I got myself treated, I'm getting treated. But are we processing it? Are we internalizing it? Are we working on ourselves? I don't know. I think the jury's out on that, and it's unfair to paintbrush an entire generation saying, y'all are not processing it or you don't know how to process it. I think it's very individualistic. But the measures, the metrics, and the assessment still remains the same.
So I actually disagree with the statement. The thing is, men today actually do not know more about mental health. They know words regarding mental health. So they've heard the words that are about mental health, which is self-care, self-love, all of that. But they don't know what it is, what is mental health for you, when you think about it. Now, even when you spoke about your whole experience, throughout that time, you didn't know what it is about your mental health. You felt lonely. You were surrounded. Your journey was a lonely journey. You felt alone.
But throughout that time, your mental health was low and you didn't know what to do about it, right? So the point is that when we talk about saying that, oh, men know more about mental health, they don't. They don't know about mental health, they just know the words around it. And the other problem is that apart from actual mental health, you also have a lot of pseudo mental health stuff that is being spoken about. Again, I will sound like a stuck tape recorder and even a boomer in one sense, that social media is what is amplifying that. I go on social media, I see 20 people telling me that if someone has hurt me, I should cut them out of my life. I shouldn't even interact with them. That is going to help my mental health and boost my mental health. Which is why so many men who are single have no friends. Back in the day, the older generations, when they used to riff with each other, they used to say the nastiest things to each other, like the most mean, derogatory things that you could think of. And then they'd be like, okay, come, let's share a beer. So they accepted that this is not what I meant. I'm saying it as a joke. There was an understanding. That no longer exists. Everybody is trying to read between the lines. I may say, oh, hey, that's a really nice shirt. But I would have said shirt. And suddenly now, he's thinking, oh, he paused on shirt. What does that mean? We're trying to read more into it, right? That is the problem. We talk about saying mental health, but when we're talking about mental health, we're only thinking about all of this. How am I feeling? I'm feeling good. Okay, if I'm feeling good, what does that mean? Not really. And I'm going to bash Pradhan here a little because he's only spoken about being a village. Yes, you can be a village, but if the whole village is saying the same thing and it's not working for you, it doesn't help. Now, I, as an example, am probably a complete anomaly. So I grew up mostly raised by women. I had 5 women in my life, my mom, her 2 sisters, and my 2 grandmoms. They were my idols. They carried me forward. They taught me everything. The men in my life taught me what I shouldn't do. I'd never looked at my dads and my uncles to say, hey, this is something I appreciate about you. I'm going to take it. It was like, no, I don't like what you're doing, so this is something I'm not going to do. So this was a very broken village. And I know feminists will be like, yes, let's go women. But the point being is that when we talk about this, mental health has to be spoken about as to what exactly is mental health. What are we doing in mental health and what are we trying to focus on in mental health? Not just give it terminologies, make it into a reel or a post and then throw it out there. The village is there, but now the village has become gigantic and it is dictated predominantly by social media. What my dad says is fine. Yes, there is some effect to it. But when social media or someone on social media says, hey, this is how it should be, I'm like, yes. 20 of my friends have commented, yes. People have liked it, yes. And they have continued. And to answer your question, it's the super successful are not dictating social media. It's actually a lot of the Gen Z kids. Twitch, which is the #1 streaming platform, most of the Twitch streamers that are #1 are below 25. So they're all within Gen Z. And again, I'm not saying that they're saying or they're promoting anything wrong. A lot of Twitch streamers are doing very well. And they're actually trying to promote mental health and promote the right things to do. But that's the thing. It's the onus on these people to say, hey, we need to now calibrate and shift social media from a toxic engagement spot to something that is a little more healthy. Way more challenging to do than I'm speaking. But that's my point here. So I completely disagree with this altogether. The loneliness stems from, you don't even need to be alone to feel lonely. I could be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. Because if even one person doesn't understand who I am, I will feel lonely. And what happens post-marriage is that men fully go into their families. My family is my family, so I only focus on them. And so friends generally take the back seat. There's nothing wrong with that. But the people who have been given the back seat need to understand that I also need to move on and figure out in my life. I can't just keep depending on these people. A village has to keep growing. A village cannot stay the same.
I have to agree with Anirudh. I think, due respect to both of you therapists, I think today my therapist is AI. ChatGPT seems to be the therapist for most people, and you know the dangers of that, right? And I keep correcting myself from time to time. Look at how the patriarchal mindset and hangover still remains. I said village, uncles, grandfathers, fathers. What happened to the ladies of the village? Right? Because they all played a fabulous role, and we've had these discussions before. So yeah, it's about we correcting ourselves, catching ourselves, saying that patriarchal hangover still remains. How you may mean in your head, by village I mean everyone. But you said these three things, man. You said uncle, granddad, dad. Why? Right? So can we catch ourselves, correct ourselves and grow? And I think it's a real present danger. It's not social media alone, it's AI. It is all around us, it's just going to get worse. And a lot of respect to your generation. I don't think we went through any pressure, the kind of pressures you all have gone through.
Absolutely.
Absolutely nothing compared to what you all have gone through. It's crazy how quickly these transformations have happened, the kind of things that you all have had to see and have to deal with. Hats off to all of you all. It's very easy for us to be condescending, sitting here and saying, hey, you fellas, you did this, you did that. No, but I think there's a lot of respect. We got to accept. I mean, we played gilli danda and marbles, man. Very, very simple world compared to where you all live in today.
The thing that we did, I wrote about this, and I think the problem is that we're raising boys to be boys, and we're raising girls to be, see if somebody's not feeling good, see if somebody is quiet, see if somebody is, grieving something. And I think the main problem is, and I have a nephew, and I've really tried to give him these feminine qualities that I have been taught as a product of patriarchy, which is that actually we need, it's not about men and women. I think what we need to cultivate better is femininity. And all of the things that we understand of care and love and attention happen to be bestowed on women as a responsibility, which Simone de Beauvoir and a lot of people have written before me, so this is not an original idea. But what we need more of from everyone, whether it's a grandfather or whether it's a 7-year-old boy, is to recognize that mental health is not this big grand thing that comes up one day when you're feeling sad or something. It's the small things. It's noticing somebody is sad and giving them a hug. It's calling somebody up to check on them without purpose. It's these small micro things that build community, that build understanding on a day-to-day basis. So I don't think we have to wait for you to figure out social media or for us to thoughts on AI are a different discussion. But I think what we're all looking for is this type of attention and care and love, and that is well within our accountability and responsibility to exercise, even just in the bubble that we live in. So all this to say that widening the conversation about being healthy, whether it's mentally healthy and not the absence of mental illness, but just being healthy, is actually just thinking about all of the things that the mothers that we know have done, or the grandmothers, or whoever this person is who you felt seen always, and saying, okay, they do this one thing, I'm going to try to do that. Because actually what we need is widening the idea that femininity does not belong to women, does not belong to somebody's grandmother, but that needs to be exercised to actually feel good about yourself. That's fine.
To quickly bring this back to how I think we're reflecting more and more towards Gen Z versus millennials and coming back to men. So I'm going to come back to men here and say this one thing where we all know that men's pain is real, but at the same time our entitlement is also real. So what really happens here is we end up collapsing both of them, and the two narratives that remain are either we demonize them or excuse them altogether. There is no middle ground that exists. As you said, I've personally seen this in my generation. Shitty masculine man is demonized, a shitty feminine man is excused, forgetting that he's indeed a shitty person. So why is just the demonization or exclusion altogether? Where is the middle ground? Why haven't our generation found that middle ground in them as such? I want to read this.
I think it's also understanding that we, to some extent, are trying to cater to this whole romantic angle of things, right? So now, a shitty feminine man is not demonized or attacked as much because he's still going to be pro-woman in some way that gets him what he wants. And so, as of now, that is the narrative to play, just from a romantic relationship standpoint. The shitty masculine man is still an MCP, and so his ways are no longer working towards getting a romantic partner.
It may work with a few, but more often than not now, it is not working, right? That narrative has shifted. That women want the soft boy, the nice boy, the cute, sweet boy versus this angry, manly man who will just be that whatever Kabir Singh and whoever else and whatever those kind of men are. That is why that is happening, right? The reward is coming from the outcome versus saying that, hey, we should not be rewarding shitty people in general. The keyword should be shitty, not masculine, feminine towards it, right? So that is where that shift is coming into that aspect, because a big factor is sleeping around, being in a relationship and all of that, which is why whatever is working in the dating world works. That is why that's the problem, more than anything else.
It's a generation they're over-optimizing for the dating.
It's not even a generation thing, it's a timing thing. At this time, it's not even just with your generation, right? Our generation has to follow the same thing. You have to be more of a feminine man if you want to be able to date better. You cannot be a masculine man. So it has nothing to do with the generation at all. It's the timing that we are in right now. The world we are living in currently dictates that by the women and the men together.
But why did you think that feminine is pro-women? Oh yeah, actually, why do you think that?
No, the feminine man is being pro-woman so that he can get into a relationship.
But like, being feminine and being pro-women are two different things.
That is the femininity that he is trying to portray, right? He's not genuinely being a feminine man. He's portraying what he thinks is going to win over a woman.
I also really like to acknowledge the fact that it's nice to be seen, and I think what you said about a lot of expectations here and all of that, just wanted to appreciate that. Going back to, I think, our proposition, I think you said something along the lines of how loneliness always existed, but it's just amplified a lot more right now. I think speaking from a personal and professional standpoint, I feel like men today do know a lot about mental health, maybe not what it means for them, but in general, the concept of what mental health means. And I feel like that's why the loneliness aspect is highlighted a lot more, because they've started understanding how this can impact their personal and social relationships for that matter. So I think that's something that I also wanted to understand your perspective on, because I think it's almost like saying that I'm hungry but not being able to eat any food. That's what's happening in this generation. They're very well aware of what emotions mean, what feelings mean, how thoughts can be processed, but because there's no words or terminology translating into action, going back to the very first point of therapy speak being here and there, but are you really doing anything about that? And I think which is why I also agree with the statement of men do know a lot more than other generations might have known, because of the access and resources that we have today, which in turn is also bringing about this loneliness factor a lot more, because I think now men are a lot more aware about what vulnerable interactions can look like, but they don't feel safe enough or manly enough to have those with maybe certain people around them.
So to add on that, I would just say loneliness is not about not knowing people, but it's feeling unknown among the people you know. So people always say, you're an entrepreneur, you've been doing this for the past 10, 12 years. You might have hundreds of friends, you might know so many people. But I would say, no, I can literally count them in like first 2, 3, 4 fingers. So that is an aspect. Your point. So I think that is what we need to really focus on.
How many of us men here have cried in a movie? Does that make us less feminine, not in tune with our feelings?
Less masculine anyway.
Less masculine?
No.
This is mental health awareness I'm asking, right? A show of hands, how many of us have cried at a movie? Oh shit, there's no masculine man on this panel. Right? That's how we are paintbrushing things.
Yeah.
It's scary. So when you say you're not aware, I think we're aware. Are we able to accept? Are we able to, get to the fact that you're comfortable? Yeah, man, in front of an audience, we lifted our hands and said, yes, we cried at a movie. Doesn't make you less of a man. Maybe it makes you a little more enduring with some of them, but it's not a generational shift.
Can I
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's become very easy to be lonely. There is just so much distractions in the world that you can get through your whole day without giving your mental health like even a little thought. Like there's so much distractions out there. You can get through your normal life without thinking about this. And if you just throw in a few therapy vocabulary around your friends, I feel like you can continue to live a relatively normal life without even thinking about this. But real progress comes from discomfort, where you actually expose yourself to other people and let that interaction change you, let that interaction affect you, which is uncomfortable. And I think the world today is very focused on removing every single uncomfortable scenario we have out of our lives. And this is just simplifying and easing all our lives by just pretending or like just performing the therapy speak and just easily not even think about it and just get through your life.
Very surface level fixing that we're.
And just to agree with you and disagree with the proposition, I think we've learned the language of what it means, what are these terms, we've understood all these things, but we're not able to adapt to how do we fix our learnings. This is what I'm trying to say is, men today know more about mental health, yes I agree. Are lonelier than any generation before? Probably. But are these two things connected? I really don't think so. Having knowledge does not necessarily lead to being more lonely. Having knowledge, yes, that's good, but has that led to loneliness? I would say no, which is where I disagree with the proposition, and I have to agree with you, and I think that was the point I was trying to make as well, is that knowing a lot of things does not necessarily mean you're listening. Stretching that example to the greatest extent, someone like a Hitler, let's say he was understanding what he was doing, does that make him a better person? Obviously no. So understanding these terms and ideologies of loneliness and all these things does not necessarily mean you're fixing them.
Cool. That's round 3. Back to the audience for your last poll. I'd like to just get you back to the post survey and just take 2 minutes to complete that, please. And that includes the spaces. Thank you, everyone. This is Fight Club thanking all the audience plus the debaters to be actually give us your time to have this conversation about men and men's mental health. As I said, Fight Club exists to socialize the conversation of men's mental health like it's never been done before, so expect more interesting events, experiences from us. If you aren't already following us, that is Fight Club _approved on Instagram, and this is a recorded conversation as a YouTube production, so that will be coming out in a couple of weeks, and the entire thing, as well as you can see a lot of the clips on Instagram as well. We can now disperse for food, and I'm pretty sure everyone's hungry, and we can take it from there. If you have any questions, socializing with the debaters, you can do that after. Thank you.
Thank you so much.